This is Fit Amputee powered by James Roberts, and today's guest on episode 3 is Sam Bearfoot. She's a nutrition therapist and business coach. So I'll pass her over to you guys so she can tell you a little bit more about herself.
Good morning, James. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you for having me on your brand spanking new show. As you said, my name is Sam Bearfoot. I'm a nutritional therapist, but I'm much better known as the digestion detective. And I have recently come out as a business coach at the Therapist Revolution because, like you, I have a podcast show which has been pretty successful with 500,000 downloads. My show is also aired on UK Health Radio. So I have a lot of other therapists following me and wondering what I'm up to and asking me to teach them and help them and support them. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to come out as a coach, help these guys out, and help them to achieve the kinds of stuff that I get to achieve each week.
Okay.
So, yeah, that is me.
And then you say you help therapists. Do you help anybody else within the health profession?
Yeah, but it kind of ranges from, it's not just nutritional therapists, it's not just people in my field. You could be someone in fitness, you can be someone that's, in that emotional kind of field, that energy kind of field. I've got quite a few different people, and actually saying that, there's some people that I know that are not in that field at all. I have a photographer, I have a finance lady, I even have a dentist. So, yeah, there's a few. There's generally a few, but I prefer to work in that field. I think mostly because I can understand where they're coming from, and I kind of understand the industry. So it's usually pretty helpful for me to be able to just, think off the top of my head and go, well, actually, this has kind of worked before with myself and other people, so maybe we should try this. Whereas with some of my other clients, it's kind of really challenging for me, which makes my work really interesting, because then I have to sort of wander off and have a little bit of research and test some of the strategies, if you like, that I teach them to make sure they work, because obviously it's an industry that I'm not necessarily familiar with. But it's all good fun.
So it's probably having those three latter clients kind of keeps you on your toes then.
Yeah, yeah. And I get a bit, when they drop me a message and I'm like, I don't really work with people like you. They're like, no, I need to have some time with you. So it's all good fun, and they're usually people that I know really well, and probably haven't. I don't think I've worked with. No, I haven't worked with any of those before, but we've certainly maybe networked together or seen each other at various sort of events and things like that. So they know who I am. I know who they are. And they just like, yeah, I need to have a little chat with you about some things. So it works well. Yeah, it does keep me on my toes. It's good.
Okay. And as a result of that, have you found that it's kind of broadened, how would I say it? You've kind of broadened out into those fields a little bit more as a result of getting those clients, or not so much?
No, I kind of, all my marketing and my ideal client are within the health and wellness industry, or well-being, whichever you want to call it. So, all my marketing is aimed at those people, so it's not always going to be the case that it will fall in front of a different market of people. If a Facebook ad, for example, they're targeted very specifically to the people that I want to work with. So, if I'm targeting fitness person such as yourself, it's quite unlikely that fitness person is also working in finance. Not impossible, of course, but it's usually the case. So yeah, they kind of, like I say, the people that are a little bit off the beaten track for me, that are in a different field, they're usually people that I know or have been referred to me from maybe one of my health professionals.
Okay. And then obviously I had a look at your websites in a little bit of depth. And obviously you talk about having the right hashtags and things like that to get the right, how would I say it, the right audience. So
yes, visibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the things that very recently I've been talking about quite a bit. One, because I put a new freebie out, which are my 50 tried and tested hashtags that I've used over the last couple of years, that have really helped to elevate my content and my downloads for my show. And I decided, you know what, rather than keep them to myself, I'm going to put them together and give them away as as a freebie. But on top of that, it's one of the things that I look at usually within the first session with people that I work with, because I think hashtags are pretty underestimated. And one of it was my finance lady, I had a look at her work and she wasn't using any at all.
Mm-hmm.
And her business is going pretty well, and she can afford someone to do her social media for her. So I said to her, why aren't you using them? And her social media person had said, they're old hat, they're not really useful. And I just kind of laughed and said, okay. And usually that means, for me, that the person that is saying that hasn't had any results from hashtagging, and that's usually what happens. And I can see why, and I think people kind of use them as kind of like blasé, they're fun, and they can be that, but they can also be really specific, and they can really get your content in front of the right crowd. So it's one of the things that I sort of spoke about. I kind of try and pick a topic every month and cover it as widely and as in depth as I can, and just so happens that what you've seen is my hashtag month. But hashtags for me, they should be well researched, they should be, tried and tested, because what would work, even though you and I are in health and well-being, the hashtags that I would use as the digestion detective wouldn't be something that you would use in the fitness industry, because it's different. Although it's the same field-ish, it is different. So you do have to really sort of look at them and make sure they're working for you. And again, even if you had a fitness person, I don't know, who's a famous fitness, the body coach, for example, he's massive, he's bloody everywhere at the moment. The ones that he would use may not even be right for you. So for me, it's about, getting a really good batch of them together, researching them, finding ones that are good, ones that aren't overused, because if they're overused, you will get lost in the crowd, and it's a massive crowd to be lost in. But make sure that you're using ones that are good, that are going to be, popping up pretty frequently, and then testing them for yourself against your content to make sure that they're right. And it will be day and night, once you find the ones that are perfect for you and your audience, you'll see a complete difference in, impressions, reactions, downloads, traffic, whatever it is you're using them for, and then you know that you found the right ones.
Okay, that's quite interesting. And then obviously you just talk about Twitter, where you've got access to, Facebook's doing it now, and then you also got Instagram. So it kind of, for the younger generation, we kind of don't have an excuse, because we've got access to all that social media. So it should be easier for us. Is that something you'd agree with?
I think it still can be hard to get your stuff seen. And like I say, I think it's because people kind of take it as a given that they'll work. And then they're sort of, when they don't work, or they're, I read countless times, I've done this in forums and stuff, I've done this, I've done that, I'm not getting any traffic, and it's because actually they're not looking much more in depth into how they're supposed to work. I think people just think, I'm going to whack a hashtag on that'll work. And it doesn't work like that. But certainly, yeah, it's a lot easier now than it was 10 years ago to get your content seen, yeah.
And then when you say do your research, what do you mean by that?
There are some places on the internet where you can actually research your hashtags. So if you're someone that is struggling to come up with hashtags, and as random as that might sound, I used to be that. I used to think, what do I write as a hashtag? And the amount of times that I see people hashtagging every word, that's not right either. So, it's kind of, if you can't think of a hashtag, then there's places on the internet that will help you to develop your list of hashtags. And once you've developed that list, there's another place on the internet that you can cross-check them. So you can check them for their usage, whether they're overused, whether they're underused, or whether they should be completely avoided at all cost.
Okay, that's quite interesting. So moving on from the kind of business side of it, and moving on to the nutrition side of it, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself as a nutrition coach?
Yeah, so I struggled with IBS when I was a teenager, into my early 20s, and like many people, and I say many, there's like millions of people in the UK that struggle with it. Their GP, my GP, was not helpful in helping or supporting with that, and that's still very much the case now, and we're talking 20 years later. So what I did was I learned to help myself and to heal myself with nutrition, and it changed everything about me. I then obviously learned nutrition for myself, and after a few years of working in various clinics, I decided to come out online as the digestion detective in the nutrition field, obviously with my expertise as someone that's actually been there and done all of that, to support other people out there, because it really is a taboo subject. We do not like talking about poo as a nation, as a global entity of people. It's really something that people just don't talk about, and I find that crazy because we all do it. It's something that everybody does. You're just taught not really to talk about it, and for those that have issues in their area, it can be really devastating. So I made it my mission really to support people in that area, and I'm quite fortunate that I actually support the IBS network, which is the charity in the UK that helps people. So I work with them as well. So it's all good.
Okay. And then, from my point of view, you generally, the doctors doctors in this country more specifically, if they don't know the answer, they kind of come to the assumption it's generally IBS if they can't figure out what you've got wrong with it. Yeah. And from your opinion, do you believe that's just lumping everything together and not really solving the issue?
Yeah, for me, my opinion is that IBS is an umbrella term, and pretty much what you just said. When they don't know what's wrong, they tell you that you've got IBS. And even if you speak to some doctors, some gastroenterologists, things like that, and I've had the pleasure of doing that because I get to support some pretty big events and stuff where there are some of the leading people in the UK there, and I get to chat with them and ask them what's going on, and what they'll tell you is actually our GPs aren't. It's not necessarily their fault. They're not trained in that area. I think people forget that GPs stands for general practitioner. They're a generalist. They're not a specialist, and bowels is a specialist area. I think the disconnect happens when the GP fails the system and fails the person to say, actually, I don't understand this, I'm going to refer you elsewhere. Rather than doing that, they just give you the label that you've got IBS, which is not helpful because it doesn't give any answers to anyone.
And then generally they give you, in most cases,
give you a
prescription as well.
And it's the Band-Aid approach, it's giving you something to help with the symptom, but you're not actually trying to deal with the issue that's there. One of the sayings that I have is, irritable bowel syndrome. Break it down. If you find what is irritating your bowel, you won't have the syndrome, and that's where the NHS kind of fall down a little bit, especially in that first level of care. And then they're not sending you up to the second level of care, so they're not referring you up to someone that actually might have the answers for you as to what's going on, and give you some idea of maybe how you potentially could help yourself. But, saying that, at the last event that I was at earlier in the year, I was on stage with one of the leading gastroenterologists in the country who works in London, and what they're actually suggesting now is that because there is such a lack of knowledge and there is such a lack of new doctors coming up in that field, they're now suggesting that actually self-management is the way to go with IBS. How that's going to filter down into mainstream, general practice, we're not quite sure, but I think it'll be a big change for a lot of people, because I know we have this persona here in the UK that because we do have the NHS, and yes, it is brilliant and it saves millions of lives week in, week out, we have this thing that we think is free. It's not free. Everybody ends up paying for it in one way, but it means that the concept of potentially putting your hand in your pocket to see a specialist outside of the NHS is something that a lot of people just won't do. So I think the disconnect is going to happen, that the gastroenterology departments are going to start saying, well, self-care and self-management is actually really good. You need to sort of look at how your lifestyle is, look at your diet, look at your emotional well-being, your exercise regime, all those sorts of things. But to the patient, I think they're going to sort of be like, well, hang on a minute, you're my doctor, you're supposed to help me. So I think there's going to have to be some sort of learning curve in that arena, because otherwise it's just not going to work.
Well, probably looking at that, it's probably going to have to be a mindset shift with people.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And it's really, it's really hard. Most people that, by the time they've actually plucked the courage up to go to their doctor because of their IBS, they've usually had it years. We're not talking weeks or months, it's usually years. And, by that point, you really are at the end of your tether and you want answers now. But in reality, it could be another year or so before you even get the referral. That's how hard it can be for some people. So I can see it from both sides. I can see it from a professional point of view, sitting and talking with the doctors and the people that I get the opportunity to talk to. But I can also see it from a patient's point of view, because I have been a patient and I do deal with patients. It'll be hard, I think, but like you're absolutely spot on. It will be a mindset change, and I'm not quite sure how the NHS is going to support that.
Okay. And then do you find that there's see a specialist? Is there a waiting list like there is with anything to do with the NHS?
Yeah, there is. There is a massive, and do you know what's really crazy? And I only learnt this really recently. You would think that a gastroenterologist, which is the specialist for bowels, would be the right place to go, wouldn't you, with IBS? Mm-hmm. But the crazy thing that I learned, and this is from one of the senior guys, not all gastroenterologists are trained in IBS. There's literally a handful of them in the country, in the whole country, and he's one of them. And the crazy thing for him is he's been trying to retire for the last 3 years, and he can't retire because he can't find someone to take his role. He's been recruiting for an IBS specialist, a gastroenterologist specialist, for that long, and there just isn't any. They're not coming up. The people that are interested in that field and training, you go through the doctor thing and then you go up and you train into specialist areas. The gastroenterologists that are training, they're training more in things like Crohn's and bowel cancer, because they're the big hefty ones, with some solid answers and some solid testing, and things like that. There are very, very few people that have any interest in IBS, and he thinks that it's because there isn't really any way to test it. There's no way to get really solid results in the medical field for people with IBS. So he basically said at the event, I won't retire until I find someone to take the place. He said, but I've already been looking for 3 years. So that kind of gives you an idea of how hard it's going to be for someone to get through that referral process, to actually see someone that's a gastroenterologist, but a gastroenterologist that's a specialist in IBS, because there's not many.
That's quite surprising. I quite find that hard to believe, but like you say,
I was like, really? And honestly, that's how it is. That's how hard it is. And I think that the statistic that kind of supports that is for those that do get to second level care and go through the various testing in the gastro department, over 90% of those come out with a diagnosis of there's nothing wrong with you. And that's because A, they don't know what they're looking for, they don't know what they're looking at, but B, there is no test for IBS, so all the testing in the world is not going to help.
Okay. So then, obviously IBS, you can't generalize it because it's going to depend on person to person. Is it more to do with that initial inflammation that is the direct cause, and that's what makes it person to person? That's the actual cause?
No, everybody's really different. Some people it will be just overall lifestyle. So, everything from their stresses, from what they eat, to, having a rubbish lifestyle when it comes to exercise and getting yourself out and about, movement. Some people it will be as a result of having something like food poisoning. That's how a lot of IBS is triggered, but people don't realise that until years later. The list is massively endless. Everyone's different. Everyone is very, very different, and I think that's what makes it so hard to have some sort of test, because everyone is totally unique, and what works with one person doesn't work with another person. It makes it really hard.
So you could probably move on from that point and say, obviously, there's all probiotics is probably a big industry now.
Yeah.
But it won't work for everybody. Is that something you'd agree with?
Yeah, absolutely. And one probiotic will work for one person, and another probiotic will work for another person, because again, that depends on what is going on in the guts, how much dysbiosis is going on, where that has come from, where that imbalance has come from, what kind of bacteria they need to balance that back out. One of the really common things I hear about probiotics is didn't work, and the second thing is it made it worse. Now, the comment to it didn't work is we have a mindset of we get sick, we go to a doctor, we get a prescription, we pick that up from the chemist, we come home 3 or 4 days later, we feel better. That's not how probiotics work. Probiotics take a good few weeks to build up within the gut and to help to start making things feel better. So what I tend to find is the people that say they don't work have usually bought a rubbish one. You do need to buy one that's half decent, one that's got some solid research behind it. But you need to take it for a good at least 8 weeks for that to kind of give you some sort of impact to see whether that's going to make any change. And for the people that say it made things worse, that's a classic case of you've chosen the wrong one for what's going on for you. But you wouldn't know that, general public, unless you've really looked into your research, your probiotics, the bacteria, potentially looking at what's going on for you, and then match those up. A lot of people will buy something off the shelf, regardless of whether it's a good one or a bad brand. If you're taking the wrong bacteria, you're just kind of if I give you the image of a fish tank, and you put your hand in and you shush it up and it goes all dirty, that's kind of what you're doing. So you just kind of shushing stuff up there that needs to kind of first be helped to settle before you give it full impact, and that's how things can be made worse with probiotics.
Okay. And then for people, obviously, to some extent, I know what a probiotic involves and what it does. For people that don't know what they are, could you explain a little bit more not in detail, but just a little bit more information about them?
Probiotics it's bacteria, and it is said that there are 10 times more bacteria in our bodies than we have cells. So if you imagine we've got trillions of cells, there's 10 times bacteria to that cell. So actually, if you think about it, do our cells control us as human beings, or do our bacteria? And the answer is really it's our bacteria. So if your bacteria goes out of balance, and the way that I kind of put that is it's like war. So you've got the enemy and you've got the good troops. And the enemy are the bad bacteria that will cause bloating, that will cause inflammation, that will cause discomfort, that can cause constipation, that can cause diarrhea, all of those things. So the bad guys are the ones that you need to banish, you need to get out. But you can only do that by putting in lots of good troops, and that's what probiotics are. Probiotics are your good troops that you're putting back into your gut to go to war with the enemy and restore balance. And that's probably the easiest way that I explain it and most people understand, because it is like this whole chemistry, biology kind of thing if you get really in depth, which most people don't want to know. They just want to know what it is. So, but probiotics are there to help you to restore balance in the gut, because although we have bacteria everywhere, the majority of it lives in our gut.
Okay, that's quite interesting. And then you're seeing more and more, especially more recently, a lot of athletes are starting to take probiotics. Is it more to keep their immune system in check, especially in the winter, so they don't get ill? Is it more a
Yeah.
case of that for them?
It's yeah, yeah, definitely. Your probiotics will help with your immune system because the majority of your immunity comes from your gut. So if your gut's working efficiently, then generally speaking, your immune system's really bang on. But one of the things, I used to work in a leisure centre, and so I saw a lot of people that were really into fitness, lots of personal trainers, lots of people that were training for something. And what I found was, you're probably going to laugh and you're probably going to have some comment, which would be great. What I found was a lot of these guys eat a lot of protein. There's a lot of protein that goes in there, and not necessarily the right balance of carbohydrate going in. So there's not enough fibre going in. So you're kind of disrupting stuff in that area. And probiotics will help with that. It will help to keep your bowel movements as well balanced as possible, and to keep them moving, because that's generally one of the things that I used to see a lot of, is you're eating a lot of protein, but it's not coming out the other end. So yeah, probiotics will help with that, but it will help massively with your immune system. Yeah, immune system, definitely.
Okay. Well, for me personally, it's probably it's a mixture. I'm probably not as bad as some trainers, but that's probably because of my sporting background. But then, to a certain extent, it's changed to suit the lifestyle a little bit. So, and then also, I'm probably a little bit more knowledgeable what
Yeah,
goes in and out of
because
me.
you know what you're doing. You know, you've obviously done really well at what you've achieved, and I'd imagine you've probably had some pretty good support, people to help you to learn. But you can imagine, can't you? Must have seen it at the gym. There's people there that these guys that are pumping on and getting massive, but they don't necessarily actually look at their diet as a whole. They just kind of know, I need that protein. Get the protein, and you see them like wandering around with chicken legs and stuff. But they're not thinking about the whole picture, and then they sort of end up coming to see someone like me because actually they're hugely uncomfortable because they can't go to the loo. And I think it's just lack of knowledge, isn't it? And once I kind of help them, get them through what they needed to get through, generally speaking, I never saw them again, because that was me giving them that piece of education that they needed. So that, yes, you go for it with your protein, your body does need it to rebuild muscle and all that sort of stuff. But you also need damn good carbohydrate as well to keep that system flowing nicely. So yeah, that's kind of it was always fun, and I always knew before they even opened their mouth what they were going to tell me.
And then obviously they recommend you to take fibre to help with your bowels, but then it's more a case with my family, because one of my family members that I supposedly has IBS. They generally get that information when they have, what would it be, fibre, takeaways at certain times and things like that. Is it just that that's a problem related to them personally, or could you generalize it a little bit?
Generally, the statistics for us as a country in the UK, we don't eat enough fibre. I think the national average is about 9 grams, and you need somewhere between 20 and 30 ideally. So if you want to generalise it in that way, yes, as a nation we're not eating enough. That's facts, that's statistics, that's what the NHS are telling us, that's what our GPs know. And for me personally, taking a fibre supplement isn't the answer. You can do that if sometimes there is call for that. But for me, the answer is educating people to build in fibre better into their diet. But having said that, for those with really severe IBS, if you went, and this is part of my story, my IBS was so severe that I followed, and forgive me, James, I don't know how old you are, but do you remember Gillian McKeith being on the TV?
I don't think so. But then obviously I was living abroad because my parents were in the
Okay,
military, so that
right.
might
So
be.
yeah, Gillian McKeith came on the TV about 15 years ago, and her whole way of living, her whole diet, lifestyle, everything was all around fibre. Get loads and loads of fibre in, and that was the answer to everything. And I did that, and actually my symptoms were made 10 times worse by doing that. So what you need to be very aware of if you have IBS, you'll be inflamed. That's the answer to it. And putting lots of fibre in, yes, in theory that's a really good way to go, but if you've got inflammation, you potentially could make that worse. So rather than, like I did, I just changed everything one day. I emptied all my cupboards out and I went down to Tesco's and changed everything. And within a week I was doubled over in pain because I was so inflamed and I was eating too much fibre. So fibre is great, yes, and we don't eat enough of it as a nation. But for those with IBS, you will probably need to eat more fibre, but that's probably the second thing on your list. Your first thing on the list would be dealing with your inflammation first.
And then from your perspective, how would you go about doing that?
It's usually removing the irritant. So there's lots of intolerance out there. There's lots of people eating far too much sugar. There's lots of dysbiosis going on, so there's lots of imbalance in the gut. So probiotics, as we've already said, it would be, you'd need help. You would need to speak to someone that knows what they're talking about to be able to pinpoint and say, okay, this is how you need to do this. It could be something really simple, like you need to drink more water. There's lots and lots of different ways of doing that. And certainly what I generally tend to do is I'll give them that first step, which is looking at any inflammation. There could be some very specific herbs. Chamomile's quite good, marshmallow root's quite good for calming, and just kind of helping with that inflammation in the gut before they then move on to complete diet overhaul and repair. For me, fibre is kind of the repair phase rather than the restoring phase.
So, from what you're saying, it's a bit like trial and error, or more specifically, kind of doing a checklist to see what works and what doesn't, and then trying to get rid of things.
Absolutely, yeah.
Out your
There's a
diet.
checklist of things that people need to work their way down. You're one of the lucky ones if the first thing that you tried happens to be your thing. But there is quite a large list of things that you need to sort of look at, tick off, to figure out exactly what your thing is. And the crazy part about that is once you figure that out, you kind of work on that, you start to feel a little bit better. It's quite likely that something will change in a few years. Just as you restore the balance, things start to sort of give way. It means sometimes that you can relax a little bit on the changes that you've made. Sometimes that's okay. Sometimes it's a complete change and overhaul. But you have to learn to keep on top of it, and that's one of the things that I'm really big on. It's not me just giving you an answer, it's me teaching you to learn and figure out the answers yourself, because I think that's really, really important.
Okay. And then something a little bit off track. Obviously, you're seeing more and more gluten-free stuff becoming apparent in the market. Is it a case of these big companies running with it and kind of playing on IBS and obviously different kind of I won't say diseases, but different forms of nutritional problems somebody might have, and obviously the ones that only really need gluten-free stuff are celiacs. So could you expand a little bit on that, on your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think the whole gluten-free thing is a thing, but I think, like you said, the marvellous marketing people of the world have decided to pick that up and run with it, which kind of puts a bad spin on it. Sometimes, it's a bit like detoxing. I mean, how long has that been about? Detoxing is a thing, but again, the market has picked it up, and now it's kind of frowned upon. They've kind of turned this word into something that's negative when it doesn't need to be that. And I think part of that is because you've got so many companies picking up and running with it that now you just think it's a fad. And unfortunately, it's not a fad. Celiacs definitely, they need to be, very, very careful with what they eat, because theirs is a genuine reaction, whereas a gluten intolerance is very different from a celiac. A celiac, you can die. That's as severe it can be. Whereas a gluten intolerance, you can be bloody uncomfortable for quite a while, but it's quite unlikely that you're going to die from that. It is a massive thing, and if you look into the history of wheat, how it's farmed, how it's changed over the years, how much of it is actually put into our food, it takes me back to the real simplistic view of nutrition, which is everything in moderation. There is nothing that is off my menu, nothing. But I wouldn't say to anybody, you can eat that repeatedly, week in, week out, because that's not how it works. For me, I have to be careful with my wheat and gluten intake, because I know that it irritates me. I know it's something that my gut isn't really happy for me to have. But having said that, I love a bit of pizza, so I can have a pizza. I'll treat myself to pizza once a month. I'll make sure that I go to a really good Italian restaurant and have it there. It's not something that's come off the conveyor belt. I will make sure that I support my gut with taking some enzymes, digestive enzymes, to help my gut to digest that. It's all about moderation. And I say to anyone, if you doubt it, if you doubt that whole moderation thing, try and take yourself off wheat completely for a week. I guarantee you'll open your cupboard and you'll find at least 10 things in your cupboard that have it in it, even if you don't think it isn't that. Sauce, sausages, coatings for seasoning. It's absolutely in soy sauce. It's everywhere, and you just don't realise how much of it you're actually consuming until you start looking for it. And I think potentially that is where that whole issue comes from.
And then something probably you might agree with, it's generally you wouldn't look at the ingredients on the back of a packet in the shop. It's something you'd assume, oh, this won't have it in there.
Yeah, people just don't realise. When I was figuring this stuff out, and I had to cut it out. Yes, it's really hard, and I mean, who knew soy sauce had wheat in it? And I figured it out because I bought sushi, and you wouldn't think that sushi is going to be one of your trigger foods. But it's rice, that's generally okay. It's fish, vegetables, seaweed, and that was okay. And it wasn't until the evening that I was like, why do I feel so awful? And it's because I put soy sauce on it, and it took me ages to work that out. I'd connected it back to the sushi, but I was like, I can't figure out what is in this that's the problem. And it is hard, and honestly, it's in everything, and people are really surprised. Crisps and silly little oat snacks, things like that.
Oh yeah, but the oat snacks, you should realise there's going to be some sort of wheat or barley or something in it.
Don't associate though that oats, even though it's a grain, is the same as wheat. It's still grains, but they think that for some reason they think it's separate. But
it's got to come from somewhere, though.
Yeah, I know. But again, it's just lack of education. We're not really taught these things. I know cooking classes and stuff at school are virtually non-existent. How are people supposed to know this unless they take an active interest in it? And it's just one of those pieces of the puzzle that we have seemed to have forgotten.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So would you say, going on and analysing what we've talked about, is it best for people to just rifle through their cupboards and see what they've got?
I think, do you know what? I think if you can take a moment and honestly look at what you're consuming, you might be quite surprised. Even if you don't want to look at weight, for example, maybe target salt, or maybe target sugar. those are the other two big ones that are around that we do need to be careful of. Salt, especially in little ones, that can be quite dangerous for little children. And anybody that has children that gives their child too much sugar, that is definitely a bad thing. But look at it for yourself. I think if you just kind of every now and then just wake yourself up, have a look at actually what you're consuming, and you may be unpleasantly surprised at what you're doing.
And then probably it's day-to-day living has become more and more a problem with that, because obviously everybody wants that convenience, be it food.
Yeah, lifestyle has massively changed. Our lives are hugely different now than they were 30, 20 years ago even. It's all hustle and bustle, we're all on the go. There's so much convenience for you to just walk out the house first thing in the morning without eating a thing, because when you get to the train station, there's stuff there for you to grab. Even if you don't get it there, maybe you grab the coffee there, and when you get off the train, you get something at the station. It's really, really easy for us never to eat at home. And if you never eat at home, you're picking up convenience, so you'll never truly understand exactly what you're eating.
That's quite scary to a certain extent, but then you think, well, do you truly know what's going into that product?
Exactly. Yeah, you don't know.
And whereas if you're eating at home, if you're cooking from scratch, you know exactly what's going into your meal.
Yeah, obviously I do. I don't. There isn't a single jar in this house. It doesn't exist. But I know for some people that's the way that they cook. So maybe just have a look. What's a UK face? Spaghetti bolognese. That's a big one. Just have a look at how many teaspoons of sugar is in your tomato sauce that you're using. I won't use a brand so we don't get in trouble. But have a look. At the lasagna sauce, the red sauce that you're going to put in that. Your meat. Just see how many tablespoons of sugar is in there, because there's a lot.
Well, a lot of the television programs in this country, especially the health ones, of anything to do with probably anything that's jarred. Yeah. I think they've done how much sugar is in X, Y, and Z. Yeah. I think in the past they've done it on salt, which to certain, I think salt kind of gets a bad name for itself to a certain extent.
It does, but salt's essential. We would die if we didn't have any salt. That's one of the things that people don't realise as well. If you were to cut everything out and not eat any salt, that's not good. We do need some salt in our system, but there is obviously the two extremes, and we do eat a lot of it. We do eat a lot, but it's hidden. It's hidden in lots of the convenient stuff that we're grabbing, and the jars and things that we're making at home. So yeah, it's everywhere.
Well, probably expanding on that a little bit. Generally, the manufacturers don't even put the dictionary form of ingredient. It's chemical compounds. So unless you've got a science degree or a biochemical one, you'll have no idea what that it actually is in the product.
They do make it really hard. Manufacturers do make things really, really hard for the general public. I know that for people just looking at the nutritional value bit on the back of the jar or whatever, that just confuses them, let alone actually reading the ingredients. So, it is hard, and one of the ways of avoiding that is don't buy them. Make everything from scratch. But I know that people are busy, the skill isn't necessarily there. It does take time, so we do have to have some sort of knowledge on how to read the ingredients label.
Trying to think the easiest way. Obviously, anything that ends in O's is generally not good for you, but then you can't just generalize.
You can't say it's generally not good for you. If you can't say it, generally that's usually something you should avoid. Apart from quinoa, most people can't say quinoa, but it's good for you, I promise.
It's definitely a quiet taste.
Yeah, I can't eat couscous, you see, because that's a wheaty thing. So for me, my alternate is quinoa.
But then with cooking with it, you've got to add a sauce, of it.
No, you don't.
Well, I can't eat. I couldn't eat it by itself, and I've looked at recipes. I even found a
I just treat
recipe.
it like rice. I have it like rice. So if I have Indian food, something like that, a dal or something, I would just mix it all in with that. So I kind of treat it like so. Cook it like you would do rice, more or less.
Okay.
But I never eat it really on my. Sometimes I might have it in a salad. Pack out a bit of a salad, maybe some feta, mint, broccoli, some peas. That's quite nice.
That's still giving it some sort of kick, though, isn't it?
It's still,
Adding mint.
it's just quite powerful in the mint and that stuff. Yeah, you can't. Yeah, I wouldn't eat it just out of a bowl by itself. Now that's a bit weird.
I did find a recipe a while back to make it more savory, like a dessert type of thing.
Yeah.
And like, what was in it? It was cinnamon milk, and I've kind of put that on my page, and I was like, it's definitely. I managed to finish it, but I said it's definitely acquired taste, and for me, it was absolutely disgusting.
You got to find the stuff that works for you, obviously, and it takes a while. I wouldn't suggest listeners that have never tried quinoa before to just go out and eat a bowl of it.
No, I wouldn't either. It was, and then obviously it was giving you instructions on how much cinnamon. I had to add actually more because I'm tasting this
Go for it
in
with
the.
cinnamon.
I put loads more in than it said to, just to try and make it a bit tastier, and it was like, no, this is still foul.
Okay, quinoa is not for you.
Oh no, in that sense, it's not. No, I'll eat it, but it's of the grains. It's probably I'd say probably the least favorite. I'd rather eat any of the others first before that.
Okay. There's plenty to choose from, though. That's the good thing. There is plenty to choose from.
Yeah, I could definitely echo that sentiment. And then there's more and more coming out. It's because quinoa started out, you could say, a little bit as a fad.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was known as one of those foods that the hippies eat. Along with like millet and stuff like that. But yeah, I know what you mean.
But it's
Become a bit more fashionable recently.
Oh, that's probably television plays a part with that.
Oh, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then
It's been picked up by marketers now. I think it's Uncle Ben's. The microwave rice things. They do one that's mixed. I think it's brown rice and quinoa will mix in with a flavour and stuff. So they're kind of, it's been picked up by some of the big brands now. So more people know what it is.
But that's definitely convenience because that's not that
Oh,
That's definitely not difficult to do yourself. Okay, you'd have to do it separately and then put it together.
yeah, no, exactly. And usually there's lots of wheat and stuff in there as well, which is another little hidden area.
So I think we've covered everything on what I'd like. I was quite interested to learn more about. So I thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.